I'm Mikaela, and this is Love Mikaela, a podcast where I talk about literally anything and everything I want to. First of all, let me just say happy AAPI Month. It is the month of May when I'm uploading this. It is also the month of May right now when I'm recording this. And yeah, for this, I'm not gonna do I know when I very first started this entire project or whatever you want to call it, when I first started doing the podcast, my whole goal was to just spread word about what it's like being Asian American, being half Japanese, in particular. And so I used that very first month of May to kind of do all of that. And while I still want to celebrate AAPI month and be proud of my heritage and who I am and where I come from, I'm only doing 2 videos a month. I'm not going to make both videos about that. But my other videos, like a majority of my other videos, are me filming reviews and my thoughts on K-dramas or J-dramas or Chinese, other Asian dramas. That just reminded me, I really want to talk about that. I think it's that Thai drama, the Ready Set Love, I think is what it's called on Netflix. I gotta make a note of that. That's for me later. Sorry. I'm still talking about all those things and my love for those things, and watching media that's not just Western centered and made in the West has been really game changing for me personally. And so that's kind of another way for me to celebrate that. I don't have to just talk about the struggles or my personal struggles all the time, you know? Anyway, I really wanted to just address my beef with being my personal issues with being half Japanese specifically. When I very first started this podcast, I talked about my feelings on this a long time ago with my sister, some on my own and then some with my sister, I think. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. And I feel like I've talked about it on and off, what it means to me to be half Japanese and Asian American. But I just wanted to kind of revisit those ideas and feelings, and I don't know if anything's changed, to be honest. I'm sure things have changed. I don't know what's changed or what's different, and I'm sure my thoughts on this might be changed and different in the future. This is just my own personal opinion based on my own personal life experiences. I don't represent an entire community of people. I just belong to a community of people, but that doesn't mean that I represent them, so please don't take what I'm saying as the end all be all of what all Asian Americans or what all Japanese Americans and what all half Japanese people think. These are just my thoughts and based on my own lived experience. That's what this is. And again, my thoughts on this could change. Yeah. This is going to be a really rambly one if you couldn't tell from this intro. So here's your warning for that if you didn't already catch on. But yeah, I just want to put that disclaimer, I don't represent an entire community. This is just my own thoughts, and they could change. I'm not gonna act like I don't change as a human as time goes on. So these are my just thoughts for now. But yes, happy AAPI month. I just wanna, and this one probably isn't gonna be that long. I initially did this, I recorded this earlier, and it was this really long rambly thing, and I just felt like that wasn't what I wanted. I just wanted to be hey, here are my thoughts. There you go. And instead I felt like I had to keep, honestly, it's really funny when I look back at the notes that I wrote out for it. It was I was trying to justify myself and solidify my identity by adding all of these examples to be no, but I know it. I know my culture. I know who I am. I know where I come from. I know all the I was giving all these examples and I was that's not that's just part of the problem. It's really funny. It's funny. It's really, really funny. So that's not what I'm doing with this one. I might include a few examples, but what I did then was more of my insecurity coming out than just me putting my thoughts out there. And it proved my point, but also that's not what I wanted for a podcast episode. Anyway, enough of the long intro. Let me get into it. My first point that I want to touch on is when you are mixed, when you're half, it really feels, and it's so cliche, and I know everyone says, and they're oh, I know people make fun of people who are mixed all the time, and I get it, because there is privilege that comes with it, but also it doesn't negate the fact that there are there's pros and cons to everything, and so it doesn't negate the fact that there are some stuff that's really uncomfortable about being mixed or being half, and there are your own issues that pop up with being mixed and being half. Like, I'm not gonna pretend like there's no privilege in being mixed, but I'm also not gonna sit here and just like completely invalidate my own lived experiences because, oh well, I've got some privilege though. It's like, no, that's not how that works. Um Especially in this particular position. Um so yeah, I want to talk about just like it's very cliche, but it's cliche because it's true. You really do feel like you have one foot in and one foot out, and you never really, at least in my own experience, you never really feel like you're enough. It's very much you're not enough or you're too much, or like it's a mix of both. Like, so for me, if you haven't already heard me, I feel like I already said it, but just to be extremely clear, I am half Japanese and half white. And so I've always felt like not Japanese enough for Japanese people and not white enough for white people. Or the other side of that is I'm too white for Japanese people and too Japanese for white people. I feel like it's definitely not Japanese enough for Japanese people and not and too Japanese for white people. I feel like that's kind of the better way to put it. But basically, you're not really enough. And like, I've seen people in the past complain about it being like, oh, don't say half. Like, it's not cool to say that you're a whole human. Because there is some connotation of like, oh, well, you're only half. It makes you feel like I'm not fully a person because I'm only half. Oh, well, I'm only half. Well, that doesn't really matter because I'm only half. Like, it's, and I understand that, but also like it is like that's who I am. Like, I am half Japanese and I'm half white, and those two halves can make a whole person and a whole human, but it doesn't mean I'm not enough for either community. But I understand why there might be some mixed feelings about that term. But yeah, there is always this feeling of like not feeling like you fit in and feeling like you're not enough or too much for both sides, and so you don't really fit in. And like this feeling of not belonging, I guess. And also with that comes a lot of these like identity crises, and I feel like if you are mixed, you also will share these feelings. Like, you always feel like almost like you're playing a part, like you're not, it's fake. Like, it feels fake almost. Like, oh, well, I'm only half. So, or I'm mixed. I'm not like fully whatever. And so sometimes the experiences that you're like, oh, but like it didn't count. I don't know. I don't know. It is unfortunate. There's a lot of identity crises that happen. It's like, I also feel like I've seen some people talk about this, but I'm not going to say it's like a universal experience, that like you identify with one side more than the other in certain times of your life. I feel like when I was younger, especially, I definitely like wanted to be more white. I didn't really identify with my Japanese side, and I like, there were parts of being Japanese that I really loved. Like, culturally, I was surrounded by Japanese culture like a lot, and like in the household we follow a lot of like cultural norms, like Japanese cultural norms, at least from what I know. um like, when I was little, like culturally I was brought up with a lot of Japanese culture. We made mochi every year, we still do. We would go to obon every year, we still do, which was one of my favorite things, and I've talked about that before. I love obon so much. I've been doing the dancing for that since I was like 5 years old. Like, we have old home videos of it. It's just so fun. I love it so much. It's so fun. And like the ideas behind it, and like inviting your ancestors to come in, it's just like, it's lovely. I just really like it a lot. Anyway, but we used to, like, we don't wear shoes in the house. You say itadakimasu and gochiso sama after you finish, like itadakimasu before you eat, and then gochiso sama before, like, after you finish. I did the whole Saturday Japanese school thing. Did I learn a lot? No. I'll get more into that later. Like, I did all those things, but like, it was almost, and while I did enjoy it, a part of me also felt embarrassed about it because it's like, oh, it's so weird. No one knows what this is. Like, no one knows what this is. Everyone thinks it's weird. Um, like, and I had the same experience that a lot of Asian kids have, where you bring your lunch to school and it has like traditional, or like, I don't even know if you would call it, I guess, traditional foods, but like normal foods that your family and the people from your culture and from where you came from eat. And everyone's like, oh, that's gross. Like, I had that same experience too. Um, but it's just like, because the privilege of it is that I could almost lie to myself and convince myself that like, oh well, I'm not really like, I don't look that Japanese, like I'm not that Japanese, so it's okay. I wanted to be more white when I was little because that was what I was surrounded by. And also I need to just add that I grow up in a place of privilege where I had a lot of other Asian people around me, like a good amount. It wasn't like we were the only Asian people in our town. Like there's like a decent community of Asian people here. There's places within an hour's drive that have very large Asian communities. Like I can drive to Little Tokyo if I want to, or Koreatown, and Chinatown. Like I have access to those places. The closest, I guess there is an Asian food market, but it's not a big one. It's not like a 99 Ranch or like an H Mart or anything like that. There's a Mitsuwa about 45 minutes away, and the Korean market is like about the same. It's not like a big H Mart or anything. It's just like the Korean market at like the Galleria. Um, but like so I have access to these things. It's not like a super far away thing, and I also had like a decent amount of Asian people growing up around me. But like when I was growing up, the people that you saw in the media were all white people, and it's still obviously very much an issue now. Not as much as before, but definitely an issue now still. But I was surrounded by seeing that like white as the beauty standard, and so I wanted to be more white. I didn't want to identify with my other background. And like when I was little, that was kind of the thought. And then when I got older, it was like embarrassing. Like when I was little, it was just like, oh my gosh, like look at all these cool people around me that are celebrities and they're all white. So obviously, like I wanted to lean more towards that. And then when you get older, it's like, oh, I'm embarrassed. Like nobody knows about this. Or like anime wasn't like a big thing at the time. It was just like people who were like nerds or like weebs liked it. And which is fine, but like it was like in middle school, it's like, oh, I don't want to be associated with that. Like it's embarrassing, it's weird. But it's funny that I say that. Like I know like that's definitely how I felt, but there was still a part of me, maybe it's a good thing. I guess it is a good thing. There was a part of me that was still very, very proud of my background and where I came from. Like I remember being really embarrassed about the fact that like when people were like, "Oh, do you want to hang out on Saturday?" I'd have to be like, "No, I have to go to Japanese school." Like I think there were some people that I like didn't tell them where I was going. Like I'll just be like, "Oh no, sorry, I'm busy. Like I have something I have to do." And then eventually I'd have to tell them because it's like, well, every Saturday from this time to this time you're busy. Like, what are you doing? And then I'd be like, well, I'm going to school. I'm going to Japanese school. Sorry. Like, I didn't want to tell people about it because I was embarrassed. Um, and even in the midst of all that, though, I remember there were times like I don't know if this is weird or not. And this is also me being like, why would it be weird? You're literally Japanese. I like to wear, I say this all the time. Okay, not all the time, but I say this whenever I get to put one on. I would wear traditional, like Japanese, like traditional, like kimonos or yukatas. I would wear those out all the time because I feel so pretty when I wear them. I would just wear them out in society if, like, I wouldn't get weird looks if I did that, but I know I would. Also, the only other downside to it is actually there's two. The other two downsides to it are there's not really a ton of places for you to hold things. I know some people put stuff in the sleeves, and my bachan made this thing that you put in your obi, and it's got it's like a little to keep the obi flat, the belt part of it, if you know what I'm talking. If you know what a kimono is or what a yukata is. To keep the belt part flat, sometimes you put this like piece of plastic kind of in the front. It's not like hard plastic, but it's like plastic, so it's like it keeps it smooth basically. My bachan has some, and then she like made them so that way there's like a little pocket in there so you can kind of store things, like you put your phone or like a couple like dollar bills, not dollar bills, but like you put some money in there, stuff like that, or like a little lip gloss or something. You can store stuff there, or you can store stuff in your sleeves, but I get nervous about the sleeves because like it could just fall out, you know. So I don't like storing stuff in my sleeves when I wear stuff like that. But like, so that, and then also they're so hard to go to the bathroom in because like you have to, it's a whole production. It's a whole production to get it on. And so like you don't even want to use the bathroom because you're like, oh my gosh, this is so annoying. Other than those two downsides and the fact that I'd get weird looks if I wore them going out, like if none of that stuff was a problem, you might be like, oh, well, you could just carry a bag with you. I could carry a bag with me, but I don't have any cute ones that like go with, like they make bags that like are cute and you like carry them around. They're tiny though, first of all. And I like to have, I'm an overpacker even with my daily stuff. They but I don't have any of those bags anyway. But if I didn't get weird looks, if I could easily carry the stuff around that I need to, and if it wasn't so hard to go to the bathroom, I would wear a yukata or a kimono like every single day because I think they're so pretty, they're so beautiful. I just feel pretty when I wear them. So I remember, even though I was embarrassed at the fact that I went to Japanese language school, I would like on Girls' Day and sometimes on Children's Day, depending on when it fell, like whatever day it was on. So Girls' Day, Hina Matsuri, it literally translates to like doll festival. It's a Girls' Day. It's a day where you celebrate like the girls in your family. And normally you kind of cut off the celebrations by the time they reach like middle school age. But we still celebrate today. Like I told my mom, I was like, it's Girls' Day. Can we have cake today? And I was like, yes. So Girls' Day is 3/3. They're easy to remember. 3/3 is Girls' Day, which is March 3rd. And then Children's Day, which is called, it's Kodomo no Hi. Kodomo means children, and then no hi is like day. So it's the children, the day of the children, basically. It's Children's Day. It's also Cinco de Mayo because it's 5/5. So Children's Day is, Girls' Day is 3/3. Children's Day is 5/5. Children's Day is like kind of similar to Girls' Day. It used to be Boys' Day. I don't remember why it was changed, but it was changed to just Children's Day, and then Girls' Day kind of stayed their own. So girls get 2 days, in my opinion. But Children's Day, I think they like you just like have candy and stuff, and like they fly the little fish flag thing. I don't know exactly what they do. We didn't really celebrate it, but on those days when I was in school, even in middle school, if it was this weekday, I would ask my mom like, can I wear a kimono to school? And I would wear a kimono to school. So a part of me has always been very, very proud of my heritage, but also the insecure part of me has always been like, oh, well, it's weird. Like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And then as I started to get older and realized, like, I think you hit a point in your life. I think there's a good period of your life where it's like assimilating. Ooh, that's funny that that's the first word that came to mind. Assimilating and being like everyone else is the cool thing to do. And then you hit a point in your life where you're like, oh, actually, no, the cool thing is to do is to embrace like your differences and who you are and what makes you different and unique and why that makes you special. And when I hit that point in my life, which was probably not until college-ish time, was when I finally started to feel more like proud of my heritage and like really, really connected. Not that I wasn't always connected to it, I was. It was just like the insecurity that was there was such a big block for me that I didn't really want to connect to that side of myself at all, which is unfortunate, but like the identity crises, let me tell you. And then I wanted to be more Japanese than I was white. I was like, oh, actually, I don't like there's not really any culture here, or the culture that is here isn't good. I love so many facets of Japanese culture. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of Japan is not all good. Like we all know this. But I really, really, really loved being Japanese and the fact that I was Japanese and all the culture that goes with that and all the cool, fun things that come along with being Japanese. Like, I liked all of that and I was proud of all of that, and that was all I wanted to focus on. But then it's like, okay, so I've shifted now to the other side of this, like, line of, like, the pendulum has swung the other way now. Which still isn't great because that's still isolating a part of myself. And not really liking that part of myself. And you have to kind of like your whole self if you're gonna like yourself, you know? And liking yourself, I feel, makes life a lot easier. But I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh, well, that pendulum never swings back and forth. Or I'm in the middle now, so I'm good. Like, no, it's gonna swing back and forth. Like, it happens. I'm so sorry, but it's the truth. But because while I do have the privilege of maybe leaning more towards one side than the other, or identifying more with one side than the other, it also, the con of that is, well, I identify with both, but sometimes I come to hate one side of myself, and now I'm having an identity crisis because I'm like, the side that I hated, am I more like that side then? Do I hate myself more now, or am I more like the side that I want to be more like? It's all very confusing. I don't know if I'm doing a good job explaining any of this, but it's just there's pros and cons to everything, and the identity crises that happen when you're mixed. Not to say you don't have identity crises if you're not mixed, because I'm sure you do, but I just feel like maybe they're amped up a little bit when you're mixed. Beauty standards is also another part of things that make life hard for everyone, but it's also difficult to be like, oh, well, I'm not fully, because I'm not fully like one side and fully like the other, it makes it hard to I don't fit either side's beauty standards, you know? I'm not teeny tiny petite. I'm very short, but I'm not like teeny tiny petite. I I mean, I have, I guess, bigger eyes, but not really. Um, I've got big cheeks. I got a pretty round face. I have light eyes, so that's a plus. This is all for the Japanese side, the Asian side. And I have the long dark hair, so that's nice. My skin is decent-ish. I have really sensitive skin and I break out pretty easy, but aside from that, like my skin's like okay. Um, but I'm not ever gonna be that stick thin, skinny. Like I'm never gonna fit that part of the beauty standards. And also like a lot of beauty standards are kind of crazy. And especially I feel like especially for Japan, they're very white centered. So you might think, oh well, you must fit that then. No. I don't think so. I mean, I don't know. Also, I've never been, so I don't know. But I do know at least in terms of like weight, I don't fit that at all, and I don't think I ever will. Like that's just not the way my body works. So I don't fit beauty standards for that. And then for the Western beauty side of things, I definitely don't fit those beauty standards. I mean, look at my face. um, and also just like a logistical thing. It's hard to find. I mean, now it's definitely a lot easier to find tutorials for eyes that look like mine, but I didn't have anyone teach me makeup. I learned makeup by like watching YouTube videos, and my sister learned the same way. And there wasn't a ton of like, it was like Asian eyes or like Western eye, like bigger eyes, rounder eyes, whatever. There wasn't anything for eyes that looked like mine. I have like kind of half and half, and so like some stuff works and some stuff doesn't for both sides. Like I got, I think, I'm like trying to look at myself. I have double eyelids, but like they kind of disappear. I don't know if they're hooded necessarily, but eyeliner is hard to do. Like I have to be really careful, especially with my corners, because with mascara and eyeliner, because if I'll get the little like raccoon eyes, like it'll smudge too much if I don't like set them correctly. Um, but like I wasn't ever taught any of that. I just had to try. I like had to figure it out. Now there's definitely a lot more stuff out there in terms of like beauty, like makeup, but still not a lot. And it's just it makes it harder. It makes it harder. But like the original point is I don't fit beauty standards for either side, which I've already talked about, right? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and it truly is. Like it's really cliche and like a funny silly thing to say, but it's true. Like beauty is in the eye of the beholder, so you're never going to fit anyone's beauty standards perfectly all the time. Like well, you're never going to fit everyone's beauty standards perfectly all the time, but you might fit someone's. You never know. um but in terms of like Western beauty or like East Asian beauty, I'm not ever going to fit either of those because I'm in the middle, because I'm both. um Not a huge problem or difficulty, but just like one of the cons of it, I think. So this is more of a me thing. And I think also this is heavy. It's more common, I think, for specifically if you're Japanese American or half Japanese. Um Japanese American, actually. I think it's more specifically if you're Japanese American. Is although I did go to Japanese school on the weekends, I didn't learn things. One, because I mean, it's on me partially, at least, because I didn't apply myself enough, because that was the point in time of my life where I didn't really want to identify with that side of myself, which is a bummer. Because I wish I would have learned the language, because then I wouldn't have to be struggling trying to learn it now. Because I'm trying my best, but it's so much harder when you're older. But I didn't take it seriously, but also I think the school, at least I don't know if every Japanese language school is like this. Maybe they are, I don't know. But the school that I went to, the way that they taught Japanese, except for the first few classes, like for the really little kids, because I took it for 8 years, 7 years, 8 years, 7 or 8 years, I took it. Every Saturday you would go. I mean, you get summers off, but like basically every Saturday you would go to Japanese school for 4 hours and learn Japanese. We have a snack break, and then you can have lunch after, because we ended at like 12 or 12:30. But the way that my Japanese school worked was the teachers there, aside from the ones who were teaching the little kids, like I said, um, assumed you were speaking the language at home. And so, especially for like the kids in the older classes, like the little kids, obviously, like they're gonna teach you the alphabet and you learn the alphabet and all the sounds. So I know hiragana really well. I know katakana semi decently. I realized I actually know more of it than I thought I did, but it definitely, like, my brain takes a lot longer to compute what katakana is versus hiragana. I can pretty much recognize instantly, and I like know the whole alphabet and all that. Kanji, forget it. I know like three, maybe. And I'm trying to learn more now, so like some of it's sticking and some of it isn't. But it's definitely don't even get me started on it. I need the hiragana on the top so I can see what it says. And like I understand it, like I had a basic understanding of things, like I knew colors and like fruits and stuff like that, like stuff that you learn when you're little. I learned all of that really well. But then when you hit a certain age point, and a lot of these kids came in, like they didn't take the very first classes, they only took the later ones because they didn't need to take the first classes because they learned it already, right, when they were younger. Everyone assumed you were speaking it at home, and so the older classes or the more advanced classes that you would take were more focused on, like, yes, it was focused on some vocabulary, but mostly it was focused on like the grammar of things, so making sure you were saying things correctly. But if I don't even know what I'm saying, how am I supposed to like figure out the grammar for something? You know what I mean? Like it doesn't, it's not computing. I'm not practicing it at home because no one at home speaks it. My father is white. My mom is the one who's Japanese. My mom doesn't speak Japanese because she is hard of hearing. She was born that way. And during that time period, the doctors, which at this point I'm like, was it medical? Like, was it because of the information wasn't good, or was it racism, or was it a mix of both? Maybe. I think it was a mix of both at this point. But they told her ableism and racism. We love to see it. They told my grandparents that they shouldn't talk to my mom. They shouldn't teach my mom Japanese. Like, they should only teach her one language because she's hard of hearing, so it would be harder to learn, which might be true. But also, I feel like they probably could have figured out. They also didn't learn ASL for her. So, anyway, sorry, not to get into that. But, so they didn't teach her Japanese at all. She actually, from what I know, she went to Japanese school for a little bit too, but like didn't really learn anything there either. Probably because they were doing the same thing where they assumed you were speaking it at home and she wasn't. So she didn't learn Japanese. She learned English because we're in the United States, so it would be easier for her to get around if she knew English over Japanese. So she doesn't speak Japanese like at all, and it would be hard for her to learn now, especially because her hearing is even like as you get older, your hearing gets worse, and that is also true for people who are hard of hearing. So her hearing's gotten worse as she's gotten older, so it'd be really hard. She can't really hear what the sounds are supposed to sound like, so it'd be hard for her to learn now. Anyway, we weren't speaking Japanese at home, and then my grandparents didn't speak to me and my sister in Japanese. We learned words, like if there was common words that like were more common in Japanese or like were really common to say, we might learn them. Like we learned itadakimasu and gochiso sama because we would say that after. We wouldn't be allowed to leave the table or start eating if we didn't say either of those phrases. Or like rice is gohan. You use that word a lot around people, so we learned that. Oshoyu is soy sauce, so we use that a lot. Ohashi is chopsticks. Like stuff that you would use like every day all the time that were really common, we learned the words for, but they weren't speaking to us in Japanese to like teach us, which I really wish they had. But, and this is why I say this is probably specific to Japanese Americans, but maybe it's not. I don't know. But I feel like it, it's definitely, it's easier for me to see, it's more clear to see why they wouldn't want us to. They were, which is why I thought this was funny earlier when I used the word assimilate, they wanted us to be as assimilated in American culture as possible. Because my bachan grew up during the war in Japan, and then my Jichan, which is my grandfather, Bachan is grandmother, Jichan is grandfather. My Jichan, he wasn't old, like he was like a toddler at the time when this was happening, but him and his family were sent to the internment camps during the war. They had to leave their house and their farm, and they lost a lot because they couldn't watch over their stuff, like their farm. And they were sent to an internment camp, and so there it was very much like it's basically assimilate or like die. Like that was kind of how it went. Because if you weren't seen assimilating, then you were seen as the enemy. And so I think that like that's not something that's going to be an easy idea to shake. And so that probably carried over to even the time when me and my sister were little. And so my grandparents didn't want us to speak Japanese. These are all assumptions. I haven't ever talked about this. My Jichon's since passed, like long past, and then my Bachon, I don't talk to her about stuff like this because I've only ever seen her cry, I think 3 or 4 times. And one of those times was when we went back to visit. This is the only time that I've ever gone. I'd love to go again sometime. I just haven't. The internment camp that my grandfather was sent to, that him and his family were sent to, we went there and she like read. There was like an exhibit, or part of the exhibit was about like a friend that they had lost while they were at the internment camp. And my bachan didn't know this man. Like she just had heard of him because like she hadn't met my Jichon at this point. Like they're both little, but she's sobbing, just sobbing. Like I don't. It's not something that I would want to bring up with her because I don't need to bring up those feelings with her. But my assumption is like probably even if they didn't recognize it, there is a deep part of them that was like, our grandkids are half white, it's easier for them to assimilate, don't make it any harder than it needs to be, this is so easy, just let them do it. And so they didn't speak to us in Japanese when we were little, and so I don't speak the language now. I'm learning, I'm doing my best to learn, especially because I'd like to travel to Japan someday and like be able to get around and not feel too uncomfortable. Not that they don't speak English there. I'm sure lots of people in lots of places speak English there. But it'd be nice to at least have some understanding and some footing of the actual language while I'm there. But like I don't speak the language, and it's very frustrating because I understand why it wasn't taught to me in a way that I actually would have picked it up. But it's also frustrating when it's like that adds not only to my own perceived idea of like, oh well, you're not actually Japanese. Even if you're half Japanese, you're not Japanese enough because you don't even speak the language. That's one of the first things people ask me when they're like, they noticed, they know like, oh, are you oh, what's your background? I'm like, oh, I'm half Japanese. I'm like, oh, you speak it? Like that's one of the first questions that pops up. And it's almost embarrassing to be like, no, actually I don't. But like I see why I don't. Like I see the paths that were taken and why that is the way that it is. But it's frustrating. It's still frustrating because it could have been so much easier for me, and I think that definitely would have led to some maybe less identity crises along the way if I spoke the language. Part of it's on me, like I could have applied myself more, but also I was dealing with feelings at the time. And another part is like, hey, nobody spoke it around me when I was younger, so I didn't really feel the need. I didn't feel the importance for it, and it wasn't done in a way that was easily accessible to me. And the school I went to assumed we were learning it and speaking it at home, so we didn't really need to learn the basics of it, but I did. And so I didn't really get to learn those things, which is really unfortunate. And then the frustration is added when my bachan, like it's really frustrating for her, and it's frustrating for me to see that she's getting older and she speaks English fairly well, but it's like, she's forgetting some stuff, and so it's hard to watch her search for words and then get frustrated that she can't find them, and then I'm getting frustrated because I can't understand her, and then she gets frustrated because I can't understand her, but she's like, why don't you speak Japanese? And it's like, because you didn't speak it to me, but also I understand why you didn't speak it to me. But it's just like this big back and forth of frustration happening. It's just really unfortunate that that's how things ended up. And I'm definitely like, I know that this isn't an isolated experience, but I also know there's lots of people who are half Japanese or just Japanese American who speak Japanese here and like kept that part, but I just didn't end up being one of those people. And it's just like, it's unfortunate and really frustrating, and I'm doing my best to learn now, but it's just like, I wish that it hadn't played out the way that it did. And also some like, not like as big of an issue, but like a bummer part is like, she'll say stuff sometimes that's like a joke in Japanese, and then I don't get it because I don't speak the language. It's disappointing and it's frustrating. But it does also add to me not feeling enough in terms of being Japanese enough, whatever that means, right? And then along with that is the feeling of like, because I don't speak the language, it's hard for me sometimes. Like sometimes I have this fear that like my only connection to being Japanese and being involved in that culture is through my bachan, and like she's getting older. Like she's eventually I'm not cursing anything. I'm not saying anything. She's going to be here for quite some time now. But in the future, at some point, she will not be here any longer. And then my fear is that, okay, so then am I not connected to that part of myself anymore? Which I know isn't true. I have all these connections and these memories. And even if I don't fluently speak the language now, maybe will get to that point. I mean, I better get to that point eventually. But I'm like slowly going to get to that point eventually, right? But even with all those things, and like logically, I know like, oh, it's not true. I'm not going to lose a part of myself. I mean, I will. But in terms of like my entire connection and my entire part of that part of my identity, I'm not going to lose all of that when she's gone. But it's just like that feeling of like I'm going to lose it, I'm going to lose it, I'm going to lose it, because I already don't feel like I fully have it because I'm only half. That's just another like issue with it. Yeah, it's just like that's just scary. I mean, the thought of losing her is like heartbreaking to me, and I don't even want to think about it too long because I'll start crying. But just like I have to also make sure that I remind myself that like even when she's gone, that doesn't mean I'm not half Japanese anymore. Like I will still be who I am even if she's gone. Even though part of me will be gone because like she'll be gone. But you know what I mean? Like that's just a life and death thing, not a culture thing, if that makes sense. Um the last thing, this is actually getting way longer than I thought it was going to be. The last thing I want to like really talk about is the idea of white passing. I understand why the term exists. I just hate it because I think it's very much used as a tool to invalidate people and their lived experiences. And it's also a way to kind of like deny someone that they are a part of themselves, deny someone a part of themselves that actually is a part of themselves. I don't know if that made any sense. Let me explain. White passing is people who might be mixed or might not even be mixed. Like some people who are fully whatever they are, for like BIPOC. Um, you're white passing, which means like you could pass as someone who's just white and not someone who's a person of color. Basically like the idea that you don't fit someone else's idea of what X is. X being whatever that identity is. So for me, it would be Japanese. Like, oh, well, you don't really look Japanese. Oh, I never would have guessed you're Japanese. And the frustrating part is that I genuinely shouldn't care because I know who I am, and that should be the only thing that matters is that I know who I am. But it's just like I'm not going to lie and be like, well, it doesn't affect me when people are like, oh, well, you don't really look it. It does affect me. I hate it. It's like annoying. I don't need your opinion about myself in terms of my identity to add on to the other issues I already have with trying to connect to my identity and who I am as a human. I don't need any outside like input on that. I don't need it. Thank you so much. I don't need it. Um like even my mom says, and I've told her, I don't know how many times I've told her, don't say this to me, don't say this to my sister. I mean, if you're gonna say it to someone, say it to me, but do not say this to my sister. Like just don't say it, keep it to yourself, man. Like it's frustrating. My mom's like, well, you guys don't even look Japanese. I'm like, to you we don't look Japanese. But in the same way that beauty standards are going to be different for different people, whatever someone's idea of Japanese is going to be different per person. Like each person is going to have a different idea of what that looks like to them. And it's very funny to me because a lot of times, like me and my sister, like I'll talk about this sometimes with her, but like I'm typically pretty good. I can be like, oh, I feel like that person might be like mixed. Like they might be Japanese or they might be like just East Asian or Asian in general. Like I feel like I can tell like pretty well because I'd be like, oh, maybe they like kind of look like me a little bit. And then that's when I'm like, oh, maybe they're mixed. I don't know. They might not be, but sometimes I'm like, maybe. Like it makes me think about it. But I keep that to myself, first of all. And second of all, I don't ever assume that I'm correct, like that I'm completely correct. I don't assume that because I don't know. And I would hate it if people were doing that to me, which I know that they do it to me, but I hate it. But my mom is always like, oh, like you guys don't even look that Japanese though. And I'm like, yeah, to you we don't, but to other people we do. And it also depends on it depends on the person, it depends on the environment that you're in, and it depends on the environment that that person grew up in. Because I know that there's tons of people who, okay, maybe not tons. I've heard through the internet and through research I have done myself that there are people who are mixed or half or whatever And they're like the only Asian people, whether they're full or mixed. They're the only Asian people in their town, and so they're very much seen as Asian and othered because of that. Whereas people maybe like me who grew up in a place that has a pretty good Asian community might not fully be seen as Asian. I don't know if that was the case. It's not like something I went around asking people, but it depends on the environment you're in and the environment that the people who are observing you grew up in, on what their idea is of what Asian or Japanese or whatever it is they're thinking of looks like. That will change how they view you. Which is why it shouldn't matter what these other people think of you, because you know who you are and that's what matters. But it's not easy to only live and operate in that mindset. It just isn't. Unless it is for you, then like good for you. That's awesome. But this is like going to be one of my eternal struggles, I think. But it's frustrating when my mom says stuff like that. But I think the reason it's so frustrating is because I really think that the term white passing, like I said, is used to invalidate people's lived experiences. Like the fact that I'm white passing, one, doesn't mean that I look white to every single person, and two, doesn't negate any of the racist encounters that I've personally experienced. But I feel like it's used to downplay racist encounters that people who might be white passing, which really they're just mixed, might experience. I think that's not cool. Like, I think that's not okay. Like, if it were just a term used to, like, one, identify the privilege that you have, where, like, maybe there are times where you have some privilege because you don't look fully one thing. Like, I'm not going to say that that doesn't exist. That would be a lie. There is privilege there. But the fact that it is then also used to negate things that people have literally lived through and experienced, like, that's the part that, like, I really have an issue with. Like, I had the experiences of people making fun of my lunches when I was in school. I've had the pulling the eye corners back in the ching chong. Like, I've had all of that. Just because I look like this, and, like, maybe to you I don't look Asian, or maybe to you I do. I don't know. That's the thing. But the fact that to some people I might not look Asian doesn't mean, or Japanese, doesn't mean that I didn't have all those other experiences happen. And maybe my experiences weren't as intense and harsh as they could have been, and that's a privilege that I have. But it also doesn't mean that the things that I did experience didn't happen. That's the most frustrating part about it. And it's funny for me personally, because when my mom's like, oh, well, people don't think that, like, you look Asian. Like, people think that you just look white. I'm like, maybe that's what you think. But throughout my time in school, I was always seen as someone, maybe not necessarily as someone who's Asian, but just someone who is, like, different. That's not the word that I should be using. I'm going to use a word that I really hate using, but it's truly the word that people think. When I was younger, and this was probably more widely accepted when it shouldn't have been, but it was more widely accepted, I was seen as someone who's, like, kind of exotic looking, right? Like, I don't look fully white, but I look like something, they just don't know what it is, which leads to now the more, I think, commonly used term, which is ethnically ambiguous. I get that a lot, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. Like, I'd rather you be like, I don't really know what you are, than people assume I'm something I'm not, or something that I'm not fully, or leave a part of me out. But like, I get that all the time, that I don't look. I also, the other thing I get ethnically ambiguous. When I was younger, it was like, oh, you look exotic, you look different. And then I also got Hawaiian a lot, which I'm not at all. Like native Hawaiian. But also I feel like maybe native Hawaiians, I don't know. I'm not gonna speak on that. I don't know enough about that. I'm ignorant about that. I don't need to speak about that. But like, I got that a lot. So it was funny when my mom would be like, oh, well, you guys just look white. I'm like, actually, that's not really something I ever got. I always got, like, you're definitely not fully white, I just don't know what you are, is kind of what I got. Yeah, so there's that. But I just, the biggest issue I have with it is because it's being used to negate lived experiences that people have had. Like, that's not cool. I don't mind like, using it to address the privilege that exists there, because there is privilege that exists there. Like, it's just the truth, and you should acknowledge it. But it also shouldn't be used to negate any of the negative things that have happened to you, and just invalidating that. Like, that's not cool. And then also, just like a side thing that I haven't really done enough not investigation. Research that I haven't done enough research. I was like, what is the word that I haven't done enough research on? But I feel like the term white passing really started to gain some speed, I guess, the more that people who were fully white did things to their bodies and their faces to make themselves look like something they're not. If you get what I'm saying. I'm not going to fully go into it, but I definitely think that if you know, you know, that has had a very big impact on what white passing means and how it affects people who are genuinely people who are mixed. Yeah. Also, this isn't really a half Japanese thing. This is just more of an Asian American thing. Do not use people who are from a specific country, living in that country, as your thermometer. I don't know what you'd call it, but your thermometer of what's okay and what's not. Like when it comes to racism and like being insensitive. Like for a very specific example, don't be like, oh well, people interviewed the Japanese people in Japan and they said that it was okay to do this thing, so it must be okay. Like I don't know why people who are in the United States are upset about it. The reason it doesn't work like that is because the Japanese people who live in Japan, who are like, oh yeah, that's okay, don't deal with the same issues and the same discrimination that people who are Japanese American deal with while they're living in the United States. Those are two completely different lived experiences. There's one experience where you are the majority of people living in your country and another one where you're not. And so obviously the people who are not are going to be in a position that is not in a position of power, and therefore they are the ones who have the authority to say, hey, this isn't okay, this makes me uncomfortable. Again, we are not a monolith, and when I say we, I mean people who are mixed, people who are half Japanese, people who are Japanese, people who are Japanese American, people who are Asian American. We're not a monolith. We all have different ideas of what is okay, what isn't okay, of what our thoughts are on various things. We're not a monolith. We all have different ideas and opinions. But there are some things that we do agree on, or that a majority of people agree on. And if someone, and it doesn't matter if you're doing something and someone is saying, hey, that makes me uncomfortable, buddy, and I'm here with you, maybe listen to them. I don't know. Just a thought. Anyway, this went way longer than I thought it was going to, but those are my thoughts. Happy AAPI month. TLDR, it's hard for anyone, I think, to feel comfortable in their identity, but if you are mixed, and especially if you are half Japanese, half Japanese American, I feel you, and I just want to let you know that you're not alone. Like, I get you, I see you. And while we may never fully feel comfortable in our full identity, I think that maybe that's just a part of life and the journey of what it means to be a human, and that's okay too. So, treat yourself with kindness, treat others with kindness. Again, happy AAPI month. Go celebrate if you'd like to. I don't know how you would do it, but if you'd like to, you can celebrate Children's Day if that's something that where you come from they celebrate. I don't think I'll be doing. Oh my gosh, for me it's today. Today is Children's Day, right? Because I think today is Children's Day for me. Oh my gosh, I should do something. I think I'm gonna have maybe I'll have like a special little drink or something. Not like alcoholic, but like I'm a juice girly or a soda girly. Maybe I'll let myself have a little little juice. I try not to drink sweet stuff too much because I'll get way too much sugar from it when I do that. But it's a special day. Maybe I will do something. How fun, cute. Oh, I can't believe I almost didn't realize it. Anyway, yeah. Happy AAPI month. Thank you so much for listening to this very long, rambly, ranty podcast. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, morning, evening, night, week, weekend, weekday. I kind of already said that when I said week. Whatever it may be for you, and I will see you next time. Love, Mikaela. Bye.